Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea DeHaan, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. And we are thrilled to have you joining us today for the final installment in our special alumni presentations this semester. We're joined today by a very special alum, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about him in just a second. But I want to start by just going over a few housekeeping issues. As a reminder, because we're using the webinar feature, we can't see or hear you directly, but we would still like to hear from you. So please use a number of tools available to you on Zoom to either chat, say hello, or communicate any technical issues with us, as well as using that Q&A feature that you should see located near the bottom of your screen in order to ask your questions of our guest. You can also find information about upcoming presentations on our website. And I will mention at the conclusion of today's event a few more events that we have going on because we are wrapping them up for spring semester. So the end of our events is rapidly approaching. So our guest today is Erik Mikkelsen, who holds degrees in communication studies and finance from Utah State. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about him before starting with our first question. So Erik is a proud husband to his wife, Erica Norton, and father to an energetic toddler, Mads, and baby Harper. Erik and family love to get outside and explore Utah's beautiful landscapes. Professionally, Erik is a director of product management at Western Governors University, known as WGU, which is a nonprofit university and the nation's largest online competency-based education provider with over 130,000 students across 4 colleges and over 60 undergraduate and graduate degree programs. In his role, Erik is focused on building a new technology platform that will replace the current experience used by all students, staff, and faculty. Prior to leading product at WGU, Erik led the formation of the Open Skills Network, a nationwide coalition of educators, employers, and government institutions dedicated to advancing skills-based education and hiring. Erik also worked on WGU's involvement in the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board at the White House, where WGU led initiatives focused on creating interoperable learning and employment records, promoting alternative pathways to opportunity, and advancing equity. Prior to WGU, Erik worked in product management and innovation at Vivint Smart Home. And Erik and his wife, Erica, serve on USU's Alumni Advisory Board and love getting back to Logan any chance they get. And we certainly hope that things will continue to improve so that we can have Erik join us in person the next time we speak with him. But today we are on Zoom. And Erik, I would like to start by just asking you to give us a brief overview of your educational journey and, more specifically, how did you arrive at your majors, and were there formative experiences you had at USU or things you participated in as a student, just so that people listening today can get a sense for things they might do on their own journey at USU to help them move forward. And I'll turn the time over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. It's great to be here with you in London. I love coming back to Utah State, even if it's virtually. And it's always a pleasure. So my educational journey. So I'll start at the end. Well, I guess your educational journey never ends, right? Hopefully. And but my time at Utah State, I got degrees in communication studies and in finance. And it was quite the roundabout path to land on those areas. And so I started in civil engineering and quickly realized that I wasn't smart enough or good enough at math and science for engineering. And so I switched to business. And I think I, at one point, was majoring in almost every major in the business college until I finally landed on finance for, I don't even know what reason, but I was told that you should learn some hard skills in business like accounting or finance. And finance just seemed like a better option for me than accounting, probably because of my just bias that I thought accountants were boring. And so I landed in finance. And then, I started taking, some courses in communication studies like public speaking, and I just really loved it. And so decided to get a second major in communication studies just because I was really passionate about those subjects and thought it was critically important. So that's how I landed on those. And then outside of classes where I had a lot of my formative experiences at Utah State. So I early on in my college created a lot of volunteering with different student events and activities. I joined a fraternity, Sigma Phi Epsilon, that I loved and provided a ton of great leadership opportunities for me. I served as the president there and over recruitment, those are great skills to learn. I joined the A team, which was awesome, and did new student orientation, and eventually was the student body president on ASUSU. Well, I guess now it's called USUSA, I think. And that was obviously awesome. And then after that, spent a lot of time with the entrepreneurship club and the business college. But I would say my most formative experiences were probably with the A team, and then with ASUSU. The A team helped me understand, like, that's where I really found my passion for helping students and learners. There's no more formative time than when you're coming to college. It's a big life-changing event, and it was amazing to help guide people through that. And that's where I really got passionate about education, higher education in particular, and then just a lot more of that and advocating for policy changes in student leadership roles that really led me even deeper into that passion. And then had a ton of great mentors along the way in everything that I was involved in. So in both majors, had a lot of great professors who were really good mentors. And then in all the different student leadership roles, great people in student services like James Morales, who's still at Utah State, and several others. And then just a lot of folks, I had the privilege of working with the Board of Trustees and eventually the Board of Regents at the state level, and just more great mentors there. And there's nothing more valuable than a great mentor. So just an amazing educational pathway and opportunity for me. I think for me, it was just always looking to do something else and try something else, to learn something new and challenge myself and push myself in areas where I was not comfortable.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eric. And it's great to hear that you had the opportunity to participate in those things while you were at Utah State. That's something that the series tries to encourage students to see their, educational experience as a holistic experience that is, yes, very much a part of what you do in the classroom, but also important to consider the opportunities that exist outside the classroom. So thank you for sharing that. Shifting now from your USU experience to the transition into your career, which is often the elephant in the room for a lot of students, right? They come to Utah State, sometimes like you, it takes them a bit to settle into a major or majors that suit them. And then just as they feel like they found their footing to transitioning to Utah State, they then have to make some important decisions about careers. So could you tell us how you found your way, not only to your current role, but also if there were experiences or internships or things you did along the way that you found pivotal? Yeah, we'll start there maybe before we explore that question further.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a great question, and you're right. It was a big elephant in the room for me. I think I ended up finding my job 2 days before I graduated, which was quite stressful. And I should have spent a lot more time preparing for that than I did. But I ended up getting lucky, and I'll go into that story a little bit. So yeah, when I didn't spend I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, and not a lot of time exploring opportunities. And so that's one bit of counsel I'll have for all of you, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But so my first job, I kind of fell in love with a theory, an innovation theory called disruptive innovation. And there was so there's some well-known folks at Harvard and other places that did a lot of research on disruptive innovation. And so I was always kind of interested in that field, and wanted to get into consulting and work for companies that did that type of consulting work for organizations. And I remember one time I was at lunch with the student body presidents from other institutions throughout Utah, and two of them were talking about Vivint and an internship that Vivint had with this guy named Matt Eyring, who was one of the leading people in the nation on disruptive innovation, and helped found a consulting firm. And so they were talking about this, and I was like, Vivint. I was like, don't they do summer sales? And I was like, this guy is like coming from Boston to like work at Vivint? And I was so confused, but I looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to do. It's right in my backyard. So I applied, and I got rejected. Actually, I got an email rejection like pretty quickly from them. but I wasn't going to back down from that. I was like, no, this is what I want to do. I was doing some research. That's another thing I guess I was involved in with Matt Sanders, who's in the College of Humanities. And I've been interviewing a bunch of leaders throughout the nation, and there's this one disruptive innovation theorist that I wanted to interview, and because I eventually wanted to work with him, right? And so I was like trying to like network my way to him. It just never ever worked out. And so I was like, I wasn't going to back down from this. So I called Dean Anderson, who's the dean of the business school, and another mentor who I had worked with in another area who I saw was connected to the hiring manager for this job on LinkedIn. And I was like, hey, can you guys just throw me a glowing review? And they were like, sure. So they emailed this guy, Matt Eyring. And then he got back to me like the next day and was basically like, yeah, come on down. And it was more of, this is what we're going to have you do, not like I'm interviewing you for it was basically a done deal after those two people had reached out to him because he trusted them and they trusted me. And so yeah, I landed that 2 days before I graduated, and it was life changing for me. And so that just goes to show you the importance of building relationships everywhere you go. And so throughout my college career, I really, really focused on building relationships. Some people call it networking, but I think it's more appropriate to call it relationship building. And I had a goal from early on in my college career to meet 5 new people a day. And so I would, yes, it didn't matter who it was. I would just meet 5 new people a day. And then every opportunity I had, I was focused on building relationships there. And those 2 relationships in particular paid off. And then, at Vivint, I was working on launching new businesses within the company. And I followed one of those businesses to the core business and built that out for a while. And actually, both businesses I was building at Vivint failed. And so I had an interesting pivot point where I could decide where in the company I wanted to go. And I kind of decided to go the technology route into product management, just from some experiences I had, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And then did that for a couple of years, but the whole time I was working at Vivint, I was reading about higher education and like how the market was shifting and different innovative ideas in higher ed, because I always wanted to get back to higher ed. And then I obviously read a lot about WGU and what WGU was up to, and then there was an open position in WGU's kind of innovation center, similar to the work I did early at Vivint. And I took the opportunity. I went from being climbing the corporate ladder, got up to the level of a senior manager at Vivint, and I was doing good. Next step to be a director, and I went and took an analyst role at WGU because I wanted to really dig into the higher ed industry. And so, sometimes you have to take steps back to step forward in your career, and it really worked out for me. Had a lot of amazing opportunities to work with leadership across WGU, and then and I think for me, then one of the projects I was working on, you mentioned in my bio, Andrea, I was working with the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board at the White House, and that was kind of a side project for me with our chief academic officer. And I just built a relationship with her again, and really she needed help kind of organizing this thing and building this national coalition. And so I was honestly I was playing to my strengths. I've always been really good at facilitating and really good at quickly understanding and teaching a concept that's complex. And so I learned those things about myself. I knew I was good at that. And so any opportunity I had to facilitate something or help bring clarity to a complex situation, I'd jump on. And so between relationship building and jumping on those opportunities, our chief academic officer was like, hey, she gave me a lot of leeway because she saw I was good at those things because I was just playing to my strengths. And then, when the time came for WGU to build our new tech platform, because I had been building this relationship with her and I told her about my background in product, and she trusted me to figure out complex situations, she said, hey, Eric, why don't you come lead building this brand new tech platform that we're building, which was a major jump in my career. And it really came from building relationships and knowing and utilizing my strengths and being willing to take some risks. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. And it wasn't until really recently that I really felt at home with my career trajectory. It's been almost 10 years since I graduated, and now I'm like, yeah, my career track is product management. And so I think you don't have to be too stressed, I think, about finding your real direction and like what you want to do. It can be an emergent strategy, I think, as you're moving through opportunities. But one mistake that I made is I started exploring opportunities with my first job out of college rather than starting to explore opportunities while I was in college. And so I think it's really important to take jobs, at Utah State or at different companies that you can get internships with, or at different institutions and organizations, and just try out a lot of things. But in all of the things you try, you have to do a really good job, because no amount of relationship building will overcome poor performance. So if you're building relationships with people and you're also doing a really good job, then people are more than willing to recommend you and give you really good recommendations. And there's nothing better to get a job than a good recommendation from a trusted source. And so those are a couple of principles that help me get where I'm at. And so hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. And you touched on this a bit, Eric, but I wonder if we can add to it. You mentioned that you did have to pivot when you were given the opportunity to move toward working with technology specifically as a product manager. Was that something that, posed challenges for you in the beginning? And if so, it sounds like you're someone who's good at doing research and reading to sort of learn about concepts and skills that are important to you. But how did you go about building some of those skills? Or, maybe because you're leading other people, it's not the technology skills you've had to learn directly, but how have you become comfortable working in a sector that is so heavily, influenced and assisted through technology?
Yeah, great question, Andrea. So it was a stressful pivot time for me, because I'd been working on this internal opportunity that we were growing at Vivint, and we really thought that it was going to take off, and it just never did, and so we shut it down. And that's always stressful, and I had to make a big decision. But then it kind of came back to, so early on, one of my mentors taught me another principle or theory about how you optimize your career. And so if you imagine a triangle, so at the top of the triangle, you think about is like your strengths are what you're good at. And then on the bottom corner of the triangle is what there's a demand for in the industry or market, or where you'll get paid a lot of money, in other words. And then the other corner of the triangle is what you like doing, right? And so when you're kind of developing your emergent career strategy, you're always trying to optimize for as many of those points of the triangle as you can. And usually you're optimizing for two of them, and you're kind of taking a hit on one. And so you might say, okay, I'm really good at this thing and they'll pay me a lot of money for it, but I don't really like it, right? And then maybe your next role is like, but you're not going to do that forever, so that's okay. And maybe your next role is like, okay, now I've got a bunch of money, and so I'm going to do something I'm really good at and I really like doing, but there's not actually like a strong demand, so I'm not going to make a lot of money doing that, and that's okay, because I'm really happy, and there's other things that can be drivers in your life besides money. And then sometimes you're doing something that you really like doing, and they'll pay you a lot of money, but you're not necessarily you're really good at it, so you have a big learning opportunity there to really dig in and learn. So for me, that's kind of how I thought about these things. And I really, there's a huge demand for product management. There always has been. There likely always will. It's a newer field, new-ish, like an emergent career path in the last 15 or 20 years, really 5 to 10 years here in Utah. And then I knew that I was really good at explaining and facilitating, but I didn't really love it though. I didn't really love technology, right? And I don't have a technical bone in my body. But I realized from working on technology projects prior to that, that there was a big need for someone who could communicate between technical folks and business folks to help find the synergy and the value there, because a lot of value these days in business is delivered through technology. And so I made that decision. And for me, really what it came down to, and this is another principle that's really helped me in my career, is I was entering a new field. I had not done product management. And so I had to learn really quickly, like, how to be a good product manager. And so there's a few ways to do that. One, you have like books, right? You have books, courses, all those different things. And then you have people who have done it really well. And so, like, I spent a lot of time, talking to people in my network who had done product management and learning from them. And I spent a ton of time reading books and listening to podcasts and reading articles and taking courses to help grow my skill set in that area, so I could like fake it till I made it. So I pretended to be good at product management until I like got good at it. And so I think, and no matter where you're at in your career, I think it's always best to find the people who are the best in the industry at what you're trying to do and ask them how to do it better. Right. The same thing happened when I came to WGU. Like, I was a product manager at Vivint, but then at WGU, I quickly jumped to be the product leader that was leading other product leaders that were leading product managers. And like, that was a big shift. And so I immediately called the guy who's the chief product officer at Vivint, and I was like, Jeff, tell me how to do this. I don't know how to do this. And he's like, okay, here's some tips, here's some books. And so I like just went and like devoured like all of the literature on leading product teams, and it's worked out so far. Don't tell anyone that works for me that I'm a fake or a fraud. But, that's the secret of leadership, is that the leaders never really know what they're doing. They're like maybe a step ahead of you, maybe behind you. And then you just have to go in with confidence, every day, hype yourself up, say some affirmations in the mirror in the morning before you go into your scary meeting with the CEO, and hope for the best, and hope your research and your learning will pay off. But I think that's an advantage that I think humanities majors have a lot in any industry, right? Because in a humanities major, you really learn how to learn. You learn how to understand arguments and dissect them, and you learn about people depending on the field that you're in, and all of those are very valuable skill sets that can be applied broadly across product management or healthcare or any industry. And so as a humanities major, one of the things that I love is that you open up a mountain of opportunities for you. And as long as you're exploring opportunities to find where you want to land when you graduate, then you're in an excellent spot to really go and thrive with the skill sets you've gained.
Excellent. Well, and this leads perfectly into my next question, Eric, since you mentioned both the assets of being a humanities major as well as the skill sets that are gained in those majors. Let's talk a little bit about the work that you've done to help companies or to help higher education and places like WGU connect their students to the opportunity to articulate their skills to employers. So in thinking about, sometimes we talk about the soft skills in the humanities, and people, are doing their best to reframe those as power skills, because we know that they are the skills that employers want and demand. But could you spend a little time talking about the work you've done to help job seekers articulate their skills more efficiently to potential employers, as well as, any advice you'd have for students who are looking for ways to translate, some of those in college experiences to a job after graduation?
Yeah, great question. So, it's a hard thing, right? And so when you're applying for jobs, the way that we do hiring in this country is we have job interviews, right? And even reference checking is starting to become a thing of the past because of like litigation that comes with reference checking and things. And so it's hard because as a humanities major, or any major for that matter, you go to a job interview and you're trying to help someone in 30 minutes or an hour get to know the whole you as a person, the whole package of skills that you bring to this opportunity, skills and experiences and personality. And honestly, it's really hard and almost a fool's errand to try and think that you can convey in a job interview, like what you can do, right? You and so you can, you can go to the career center and you get all the best advice about how you can write your resume in a way that conveys your job or your package of skills and your experiences. But honestly, that'll only get you so far. And so the important part, though, is that you find and you take and you develop experiences for yourself that you can use as evidence of the skills that you have, right? And so as a college student, there's a myriad of opportunities where you can go and volunteer and offer your services for free, right? To get in exchange for learning opportunities, right? And so there's a ton of those that you can take where you're demonstrating skills, that you will need to articulate in like a job interview or to a future employer. And so you can take those opportunities, and then even when you start to do internships and when you start to do your first jobs. So my wife she wanted to work in higher ed as well, and so she got a job at Salt Lake Community College, and it was like an administrative job that they would normally hire like students for, and she was working like 25 to 30 hours a week. But on her spare time, she was still treating it like a full-time job, and she went over to the student life center, and she talked to the people there, and she was like, hey, is there any work I can do for you guys for free? And she did some projects for them, and then she started volunteering for this group called Utah Scholars, and she's going and giving presentations to eighth graders about how they can prepare to go to college. And yeah, and then she started applying for jobs, and she got offered a job at I think leading clubs at the university or at Utah Valley University, and then also got a job at the state system of higher education, leading the Utah Scholars Program that she had been volunteering for, because she had volunteered, I think, 20 times more than any other volunteer. And so she got offered both those jobs at the same time, and then had options, right? And they were both great options for her, and she took the job at the Utah system, right? And so any time that you can go and create opportunities for yourself or experiences for yourself where you can demonstrate skills that you have are perfect, right? And then you have a lot of opportunities with research opportunities in your courses. And you can, anytime you have an opportunity to write a paper or do a project, you always want to think about how can I select a topic or select select someone I can work for. So like if you have like a research paper that you have to write and you get to select a topic, think about like, what industry do I want to work in, what job do I want to do, and what research can I do that will help me with that future job opportunity. And so you can kind of craft your own narrative, and you're like, okay, I'm a history major, but I think a lot about marketing, right? And how, like, what's the history of marketing or something like that, or PR, I don't know. In any area, you can kind of do that. And then again, back to my examples earlier, there's nothing better than a good reference from a trusted source. And so all along the way, you need to become best friends with your professors and do great work in your classes, and best friends with the people you volunteer for and do great work for them, because they know the people that are going to hire you in the future, and they can reach out to them, and they can give a good reference for you. And there's really no better way to articulate your skills than proving them through experiences you've had and results you've delivered, or from a trusted source telling someone what your skills are.
That's great advice, Eric. And I like the way you broke that down, and am amazed. Your wife is a great example of really someone who puts herself out there. And, as you alluded to earlier in this presentation as well, the importance of knowing that even if the position you're in right now doesn't meet each one of those triangulations, it's still an opportunity to demonstrate your skills and your ability to be a strong employee, and you never know where those connections can lead. So it's great advice to be thinking about that at all times. In terms of advice for students let's talk specifically about higher education and product management. So if there's someone who's watching this today or has come back to watch the recording and they're thinking like, hey, Erik seems like a cool guy and he seems to really like his job. He talked about product management and its role in our state. What if somebody is interested in doing the kind of work you do? Is there specific advice you might have for someone about the kind of opportunity or research they could be doing right now that might put them on the path to that?
Yeah, great question. So I love product management, and I will preach it to anyone that wants to listen. I think it's the coolest field because as a product manager, your job is to understand the needs of people and figure out how to solve their problems. And so you have to have the ability to empathize with customers or users or learners in my case, and understand what challenges they have in order to help build a product that can help them solve that problem in their life, right? And so it's a and then the other challenge about product management is that that solution also has to work for your business, right? It has to not only work for the user, it has to work for your business, and that's a delicate balance because as a product manager, you are laser focused on your user, but you'll never get your product into the hands of the user unless it's profitable for the company, right? So you have to find solutions that will help your user accomplish what they want to accomplish in their life in a way that's profitable for your organization. And so it's as a product manager, you're essentially the CEO of your product. You have to understand every aspect of your business, the regulatory aspects, the financial aspects, the political aspects, and then you have to understand all the aspects of your user and then be able to articulate those things to technical people that can then help you solve that and bring new and emerging technology to bear in ways that will solve that problem for your users. And so you have to be able to understand the CEO. You have to be able to understand, in my case, the single mom with 4 kids that's working the night shift at the hospital and trying to do her degree at the same time, right? And you have to understand how to convey that to your engineers and data scientists in a way that you can bring a solution to the market that will change someone's life, right? And so you have to understand every aspect of that kind of ecosystem, and it's just an amazing puzzle to try and solve, and amazing experiences that really grow you as a person. And there's no better way to change lives of people than to be the one that's building the product that comes to market. So product management is amazing. So if you want to get into product management, there are tons of resources to read, tons of books out there, and then you can get into product management from many different avenues, right? You can start your career as an entry-level product manager or a product analyst or a business analyst for a technology company, or you can start in the business, right? So for me, I started in the business, and I got to know, I was a subject matter expert in an area, and then I went to lead product in that area. And so I knew the business, then had to learn technology. Or you can come from a product purist perspective where you know the product management practices and you apply them to different business problems. Or you can come from somewhere like marketing. And so if you're in marketing or product marketing and you're really getting to know the user and understanding how to communicate to them, and then you start to pick up the technical and other business skills. And so there's a lot of ways to come into product management, but it all starts with reading and learning the principles, and understanding how to talk to people and draw out their problems and empathize with the problems that they're having in ways that you can come up with solutions. And it's always helpful to take some technical courses on the side. Like I have no desire to become a software engineer, but I have had to pick up software engineering and understand software engineering principles in a way that I can communicate with a cloud architect, right? Or someone who is an expert in data science and database administration, right? All things that don't really interest me, but I need to understand them so I can solve the problems in the world that I'm trying to solve. And so, yeah, cool space. If anyone wants to talk about it, love to chat.
Well, thank you, Eric, and we appreciate your willingness to let students connect with you directly, which is, actionable advice you gave them earlier in this talk. So that's great to know that you're willing to be a resource for them. I am going to turn the time over to our CHaSS events intern, London, who is going to be taking us through some additional questions that we've had coming in from our audience. So London, I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Eric, for everything you've shared so far. So to kick off our question and answer coming in from our viewers today, I'm going to start with this one. So you've mentioned mentors, and you also mentioned your goal of meeting 5 new people a day. So what advice would you have for students that are looking to gain the confidence to start making connections?
Oh, yeah, good question. So for me, when I came to college, and I was like the kid in high school who was like, like I just played sports and was like a little shy, and like, had my little group of friends, and like that was that. Right. But I came to college and it was this whole new world. And I kind of I had to reinvent myself, and it was very uncomfortable. Like I was not like an outgoing person, right? And I was not like going out of my way to like meet people. I remember my dad is like that, like I am now, and he was always like talking to people at the gas station and in different places and like making a scene. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed by him, right? And so when I came to college, I was like, yeah, pretty shy, and I really had to reinvent myself, and I just started to like, I had to like hype myself up, right, to like meet people because I just didn't know anyone, right, and so I kind of by accident fell into this world of student leadership. I you know I think I don't know if they still do the connections class the week before your first your first day in college. And all of the engineering sections of connections were full because I'd like procrastinated and signed up late. And so the only one that was open was like the student involvement and leadership one. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll do that with all like the peppy leadership kids. I was like hoping for the best. And so I like got in there and I just pretended like I was outgoing now, and like talking to people. And then over time, I just got better and better at it. And I'll be honest, I shouldn't admit this, but I kind of had a script that I would like roll with every time I met someone new, like walking to class. And it was like, it developed over time, but it was like, it was almost the same script every time. There's like some little jokes about my hometown where I came from, called Bunkerville, Nevada, a little village in southern Nevada. And like that always got a little chuckle out of people. And then because I like, as you start to meet more people, then like they're like, oh, I'm from like Salmon, Idaho, and you're like, oh my gosh, do you know this person? And then you're like best friends, and you're off to the races. So so meeting other people, like other students, I just think you have to embrace the fear of rejection, and know that people might look at you like you're insane, but also know that you probably won't see them again, and so it's okay. And then you also just have to, I think, a little bit of a frame of mind. I think a lot of people go to college and they think that everyone else knows everyone, or everyone else has a ton of friends there, when the reality is most people don't, right? And are like dying to have more friends. And so when you look around, and I think, and maybe this is just me, but I assume the best of everyone else and the worst of myself. And so like I look around and I see all these people and they look happier than me or whatever. And I just assume that they have all of these friends, but then in reality, more of them are like me, and they're looking at me and thinking the same thing I'm thinking about them. And so when you can kind of reframe how you look at people, then you realize that like, hey, they're actually probably also like dying to have more friends and like reaching out. Um, and so if you reframe it, it kind of removes a little bit of that fear, and you can kind of step into that void and like take that fear with you as a friend, and just go out of your comfort zone. And then as you do that, your comfort zone expands, and then it becomes much easier for you. And I think the same thing applies when you're when you're trying to build relationships with not your peers, but your superiors who will be mentors to you, right? And I think oftentimes we look at like the CEO or the vice president or like whoever, and we are like, oh my gosh, we like put them on a pedestal. And I remember I did that, like when I was a freshman, I looked at the student body president and I was like, oh my gosh, I worship the ground this dude walks on. And I was like, I can't talk to him. But then when I got there, I became a student body president. I was like, oh my gosh, I still have all the same insecurities and I'm like just totally normal. And I'm like, and then the same thing as I've grown in leadership roles in my career, I'm like, I still feel like I'm this 18-year-old freshman and I'm like duping all of these other people to think that I have these skills to perform, right? And so I think you have to realize that most people are human and they view themselves as just the kid from Bunkerville, right? Some people aren't like that, and some people have like built up like this pride and this like view of themselves that's all like high and mighty. But most people are like pretty normal. And then when you come and ask them for advice, they're like, oh my gosh, you want my advice? Well, yes, I am the expert. Let me tell you, right? And then so you can go. And it always starts off, I mean, you never go to someone and you're like, hey, will you be my mentor? And like, here's a contract. Let's talk about the terms and conditions here. It's never like that. It's really like, hey, so-and-so, like, I'd love to get your advice on this thing. And then people love to give you their advice. And then you meet with them and they give you their advice and like, oh, thank you so much. Would you be okay if I like, followed up with you in a couple of months and like, ask you some more questions? And then when you follow up with them, you make sure that you've taken their advice to heart and you're like, oh my gosh, you told me to read that book. I loved it. Here's what I got out of it. This is how I applied it. Yeah, tell me, what do you think about this? Right. And then they give you some more advice. And so, eventually you start to build up this like personal board of directors for your life. Like, so for me, I have like, my mentors are kind of like spiritual mentors, like, and they're like, I go to them for like spiritual advice. And then I got my people that are like career mentors in different aspects. And then I've got, at some point I would love to like run my own business. And so I've got some people who run their own business and I go to them for advice. And I've got like my academic mentors and like, so you start to kind of build up this board of directors for yourself. And honestly, most of my like personal board of directors, they don't even know that they're my mentor, right? But what they do know is that I like, every so often reach out to them and ask them for advice or support, and they enjoy it, and and it's incredibly helpful for me, right? And so I think oftentimes when people think about mentors, they think about it way more formally than it has to be, and when in reality it's usually informal, and so hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, that's super helpful. Thank you so much for that one. So the next question I have for you, you've been talking a lot about some extracurricular activities and how that helped you along your progression. So many students are working significant numbers of hours every week to earn money to support themselves while they are in college. What advice would you give students about finding time in their already busy schedules to be involved in student government or clubs or other volunteer and extracurricular activities? So are those activities really worth the effort?
Yeah, great question. For some people they are, and some people they aren't, right? And so like the reality is that there's a lot of opportunities out there, right? And you have to, and sometimes, and you just have to try and do the very best with the opportunities you have. And so like you have to have money to go to college, right? And so some people are lucky enough that they don't have to work but for the majority of us, like you've got to have some cash to go to college or be willing to take on a bunch of debt, right? And then it's all cost benefit, right? So for you, if your job, you always want to try and utilize and that need for cash in a way that's going to help advance your career. So you do everything you can to find a job, that's an opportunity that you're looking to explore for your future career. And honestly, no matter what job it is, there's always something that you can apply in that job above and beyond that will help you out in the future, right? And so even if you're like the one cleaning the student center at night, right? You can do some like process improvement principles like in that job to help yourself be more efficient, and you gain great rapport with your boss, and then you apply it to like and then you're studying accounting or whatever, and then you go and you apply, you talk to the people that run the accounting department, and you say, hey, I'm a really good proactive employee. This is how I've improved processes. Now I'm learning these accounting skills in class. Can I come and apply those? And your boss from your like janitor gig is like, hey, listen, London is legit. Like, she's a real go-getter. You should trust her, right, to take on this like internship or whatever. All right, and so that's my first piece of advice, is try and optimize your need for money to pay for college to find opportunities that will help you advance. Second, you have to balance, your academic time with your extracurricular activities, and you have to figure out ways to do that. And Dean Ward, close your ears. But I ended college with a 3.5, and I was like, I barely got a 3.5. I'll tell you, I was like scraping the bottom of the barrel of the people that got a 3.5. Right. And I could have put in the effort to get a 4.0, but that would have been dramatically more effort in my classes to like move me from a 3.5 to a 4.0. And so, I chose not to put in that effort and spend more time developing my extracurricular activities. And I don't know that this was necessarily a conscious choice. But now in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, why didn't I get a 4.0? And I was like, well, I guess I could have, and I did my last semester of college when I was like done being the student body president. I was like done with my role on the entrepreneurship board, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have nothing to do except for like pour into my finance book. And I was like learning these skills like way more deeply, and like just smoking the tests. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I could have gotten a 4.0 if I would have like canceled all that other stuff, but I wouldn't have canceled that other stuff in hindsight. And so you have to find a bit of a balance there, I think. So yeah, anyway, hopefully that's helpful. And I also didn't sleep in college. So you're young, maybe you need less sleep, maybe you can get away with less sleep. I remember every morning waking up, and I'd wake up and the first thought would be, when can I go back to sleep? Because I was so tired for several years. But I was willing to make that sacrifice for my future and to develop in the ways I was trying to develop. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's super great. And so you were super busy in college, and I assume you're still super busy now. So how do you work on finding a work-life balance, or what kind of advice do you have for finding a work-life balance?
Yeah, so great question. And I will tell you, work will always take as much as you will give it. Right. And so and so you have to create boundaries and decide what's important to you in your life. And so for me, I've decided that for my family, that I'm not going to work between the hours of like 7 a.m. and like 8:30 a.m. when my kids like wake up in the morning, because my kid usually gets up at 7, and then we do breakfast and hang out, and then I'll go to work by 8:30. And I also almost never work between 5 and 8 p.m. right, when my kids are awake and before they go to bed. Right, but I have no problem working from 8 to midnight, and I have no problem working from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. And most people will go to work. It's 5 o'clock, and they're like, well, I've got to finish this. I've got to finish this. I've got to finish this. And they stay in the meeting. They accept the meeting that goes from 5 to 7 or whatever. And I also don't work on the weekends, right? It is the very rare occasion that I work on the weekend. And so you just have to draw boundaries, and that's very uncomfortable. But and honestly, like, my personality is to not draw boundaries. But my wife has really helped me in this area, and and so it's been uncomfortable for me. But I've just told my coworkers and the people on my team, like, I'm going to decline the meeting. Like, if you schedule a meeting that goes past 5, I'm going to leave at 5 and say I have a family commitment, right? And I did that to our chief information officer like yesterday, right? He scheduled a meeting from 4:30 to 5:30, and he said, hey, I've got to go at 5. And he was fine, right? Or like, someone scheduled a meeting at 8 a.m. and I was like, hey, sorry, I can't do that, right? And then so they moved it, right? And I think that you'll find If you establish your priorities and then you draw boundaries, and so I'll still work like 60 hours a week sometimes, but it's on my extra time is on my time based on my priorities. And if you perform well, at your job, no one's gonna like tell you like that you have to work in this time that you've set aside for your other priorities, whatever they may be. And if they do, just leave. Like there's other opportunities. We've got an incredible job market right now, right? And so it's scary to leave, but when you leave a bad situation, it may be stressful and hard to find your next gig, but it's always better in the end to live a life governed by the principles and the priorities that you've set up rather than letting someone else run your life for you. And there's always ways to set that up so it can be more effective. And I'll be honest, I'm not the best bouncer in the world. Like I haven't worked out for like months and months and months, right? Which is something that I value. But I've said, okay, well, I'm prioritizing my family and my career, and if I have time, I'm going to work out. And maybe there's some other things I could juggle around, but I haven't, and I probably should, but I'm not beating myself up about it. And I'm trying to eat like a couple less cookies at night because I'm not working out. So, but I got my COVID-19 that I put on. So, you win some, you lose some.
Erik, thank you for that. And then I have one more question for you
Yeah.
here before we end. So as someone with a passion for higher ed and one who's had opportunities to work on advocacy and policy making, how would you recommend students getting involved in advocacy and policy issues?
Yeah, great question. So there's so many avenues. There's a lot of different avenues, and it starts with becoming educated, right? And as a student, there's a ton of opportunities to advocate. So you have your government relations committee, and you have like our university's lobbyist Neil Abercrombie, and I guarantee if you call him and you say, "Hey Neil, I'd love to get to know the issues that are important to Utah State and that you're advocating for, in Washington and on the Hill in Utah," and I'm sure he'd be more than willing to chat with you. And so I'd call Neil up and find the person who leads the government relations committee at Utah State and start talking to them about how you can advocate. I remember the first time I walked into a senator's office on the Hill at Utah State, I had no idea what I was talking about. And I'm sure the senator knew that I had no idea what I was talking about. And I was like reading some bullet points from a handout. But, it was a start. And then I went and I interned for Senator Hatch out in DC again, had no idea what I was doing. And everyone knows that interns have no idea what they're doing, but you're just there for the experience to learn how the political engine works. And so you just have to educate yourself, and you have to try it and take risks and volunteer. And if you want to go the route of like, even just volunteering for a political campaign, you're in the conversation where people care about policy and advocacy, right? And so, and the more that you talk about it, the more you develop your opinion, right? And the more you get comfortable with your opinion, and that you're willing to advocate for it, and you're better at advocating for your opinion. And so the more that you get in those circles of opinionated people who are comfortable talking about their opinion, the better that you are going to be at advocating for different points, and the better you're going to get at understanding other points of view, and your positions will develop over time. And so that's always been a place where I've been uncomfortable is in policy, but I've thrown myself into opportunities that stretched me, where I was talking to people who were very comfortable with their opinions. And, you kind of just nod your head and you're like, yeah, sure. Okay, I'm going to go Google everything you just said because I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. And so like, I do a lot of that. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yep. Note taken. Right. And then you get to know, and as you develop stronger opinions, and as you're involved in those circles, and you're putting yourself out there in that way, you'll start to see opportunities pop up to volunteer or work opportunities where you can go and advocate for the things that you're most passionate about.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. You've done a brilliant job of, taking us through the ways in which you've used skills to your advantage and how students might be able to apply some of that in their own experience. And I think it's been a really approachable conversation, and one that you've also conducted with a great sense of humor. So thank you so much for giving us your time today and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Andrea and London. And it's been great to be here.
Excellent. And I would just also say to those listening that, Eric is a wonderful example of an alum, not just because he's gone on to have continued success, but because he, and not just he, but also his wife, Erica, serve as alumni through universities' alumni associations. So we always like to remind students that we hope that the experiences they have at Utah State will set them up to be successful humans, but we hope that they'll remember us when I'm calling them and knocking on their doors in the future and asking them to come back and share their experiences. So hopefully they will see that in your experience as well, Eric. And on that subject, I do want to conclude today by reminding our audience that spring semester is approaching an end, and that means that our programming for this semester is approaching its end. And we have 2 more events in our series remaining, and those are next week. We'll be joined by Tristan Smith, who is a trial attorney for State Farm, on the 6th as part of our pre-law series. And then London will be back with us on April 8th to help me ask questions of Mike Rigby, who is an educator and academic coach here at a high school in the Valley, talking about the path to being a secondary teacher for those of you exploring the education degrees that we have in CHaSS. So we do hope that you will come back and join us next week. We hope that you will take advice from people like Erik to heart, and to make a connection with someone like him so that you can start finding your way. So again, thank you so much, Erik. Thank you, London, for being my co-host. And we want to wish everyone a wonderful afternoon.